to make sure that this is being recorded. And of course, as always, I'll be uploading the recording to our knowledge board, our knowledge base. So if you want to review things that I mentioned, if you want to show this and share this with additional people, you're more than welcome to do so. Basically, we're going to talk about all the different dashboards which we've created for the new version, and there's quite a few of them. Unlike what I normally do, normally what I do is to talk, and then at the end I give room for questions. In this case, what we're going to do is a little bit different. I'm going to talk about a dashboard, describe how it works, describe what you can do with it, and then I'll leave about a minute or two for some questions about each dashboard. And I think this could be also helpful for you. So while I'm talking about a dashboard, feel free to write down the question in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer that as soon as I finish showing everything. If we're talking about the chat, just really quickly, if somebody could just type in that you can see my screen, just want to make sure that you can see what I'm doing, and of course that you can actually hear me. So just quickly type in, yes, I can see. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Collins, very much. And let's begin. So in terms of the dashboards, a lot of the dashboards have a very similar structure. Normally in the dashboards, we have certain metrics which are related to the topic at hand. Thank you, Lydia. The topic at hand. We have graphs which present and demonstrate the statistics that we're trying to present and display. And we have tables which also display information. We have two very unique dashboards, and they're unique in the essence that they are not regulated only to fleet-based units. They're not only regulated to vehicles, even though this is the topic at hand. And that's the events dashboard, which we're looking at right now. We also have another dashboard called solution availability, which I'll talk about next. These two dashboards are unique in the essence that they work for every single unit type, whether it's a generator, whether it's a smart battery, if it's a vehicle, if it's a boat, it's a truck, it's a bus. It doesn't really matter what type of unit, what type of vehicle, or what type of asset the unit is installed in, we will still be able to use this dashboard for analysis. And let's take a look. Let's kind of take a look what we're looking at here. So we are seeing the events dashboard. Let me get rid of this for a minute just to make things a little bit easier. And we are looking here at the events dashboard, and I think it's pretty clear in terms of the name. You can understand what the dashboard is all about. The dashboard is really intended to display the events which have occurred over whatever time period is selected. In this case, I've selected 4 days, and in 4 days, this specific fleet has triggered 6,674 events, and this is 8 vehicles. So we have 8 vehicles who have triggered altogether a little less than 7,000 events over a period of 4 days, which I think is quite a lot. In the graph right next to it, we see the events dashboard and the daily view. So we can actually understand the distribution of the events over the entire week. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. No need to enter in the chat anymore. And thank you very much. Appreciate it. So we can see on a daily basis over the past 4 days exactly how many events occurred. Okay, and we could actually identify, if I were doing this for a longer period of time, I would be able to identify trends within the events. I could identify certain days of the week that events are triggered more, days of the week that events are triggered less, perhaps begin seeing a decline in events. So basically using this graph, I'm able to see exactly the distribution of the events on a daily basis. But I'm not sure that's the most important thing for you. I think what really matters to you is what actually events were triggered. And for this, we have this graph here, the events distribution graph, which displays all the top events. And this is a very convenient way to really and very quickly and very easily identify where you really need to put your focus on. Why? Because when I'm looking here, I'm saying that there are one, two, maybe three events which are really highlighted above the rest. We have the harsh acceleration events, which are displayed here in purple. We have the harsh brake in blue. We have contact identification, in case you have kind of driver identification, a little bit less. So you can really see the distribution of the events, and you could identify very, very quickly what events are being triggered by your vehicles, and of course you could address this accordingly. The last table we have here is actually to be able to see the events by vehicle. Okay? So we see that we have all the vehicles within the fleet, and we see that the top vehicle, vehicle 12, has triggered the most amount of the events. Now you could be looking at this dashboard and saying, okay, I see this information, but it's not really enough for me. I don't understand, vehicle 12 triggered 1,257 events. That's nice. But I have no idea what event he triggered. I have no idea what day that occurred. I don't have enough information from just looking at all these graphs to really understand and analyze accordingly. And you're right, you would be right. We thought about that. And one of the newest features we have in all the dashboards is the fact that the dashboards are much more dynamic. What does that mean? So that means if I'm looking at vehicle 12 and I see they have triggered 1,257 events, I want to know what events they actually triggered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on vehicle 12, and you see that the dashboard changed. Okay, the number of events that went down here to 1,257. This is reflecting one vehicle. It's fine because I chose vehicle 12, and I can see here that the major issue we have with vehicle 12, and it's very, very abundant and clear, is the harsh acceleration. This vehicle has triggered in 4 days 639 events of harsh acceleration. In this case, if I were the operation manager, if I were the fleet manager, so if I were in charge of the driver of this vehicle, I would probably call him into the office and explain to him and try to understand a little bit better why he has this need to accelerate so harshly during his driving. And of course, I can do this for every single one of the vehicles that are in this list. But I don't only have to do this for vehicles, I can also do this for events. So I can simply click here on the harsh acceleration, and I can see which vehicles performed harsh acceleration the most. So we see that the harsh acceleration was actually performed not by the entire fleet, but by vehicle 10, 12, and 9. And these are probably the vehicles that we need to discuss with the driver to understand why this is occurring. I could also do the same filtering by date. Okay, if I want to see what type of events occurred on May 11th, again, I see the distribution of the events and I see the vehicles all on the same day. One last thing about the filtering, I can only filter one by one. I can't filter using this method. I can't filter multiple assets. However, I can do this by clicking on, right? Select the assets and simply selecting the vehicles I want to see. So this way I can select multiple assets and see this information. And the same thing I can do for the events. Click here on all. In the events also, I have all the events categorized by their severity. And once again, I can select one or multiple events and view that information specifically for that. Okay. As I mentioned, I will pause for any questions you may have, and then we can continue on to the next dashboard. So if you have a question or two, please feel free to ask. Okay. Yeah, first of all, if there were speeding events, and you'd see them here as well. And we also have additional dashboards which refer to speeding events. Yes. Keep in mind, the fact that you don't see all the events here is just because these specific vehicles haven't triggered it. That doesn't mean that the events don't exist. Okay, I'm going to move on. Of course, you can continue asking questions, and I'll answer them after I move on to the next dashboard. Simply, I don't want to wait too long between the dashboards because we actually have a lot to cover. I don't know why I did that. I have this ready. So what we're doing now is looking at the solution availability dashboard. This is the second dashboard, which is applicable to all unit types. And this dashboard is unique in the fact that at least part of it shows and displays information in real time. And what does that mean? That means that when I look at this section here, the assets real-time availability, I can view the data. What I'm looking at is basically real-time information. I have an indication of what is occurring right now. What am I saying? I'm actually saying the percentage of units which are connected versus the percentage of units which are disconnected. Just a minute about disconnected. Disconnected could mean several things. Disconnected could mean that there's actually no power to the unit and therefore it's not functioning. Or disconnected could also mean that the unit is connecting, it's collecting data, however, it's not passing any data to the server. We're not receiving data from the unit. So basically, if you want to be able to review the status of the unit in terms of the connectivity, you simply could go here and see exactly the amount of units which are disconnected and connected. We could also see this information referring to the disconnection time. I'm just going to click here on the disconnected since it's much more interesting. And we can see that we have 4 units which have been disconnected for over 2 weeks. Okay? There's additional time frames here. Specifically, this fleet only shows these 4 units. Obviously, if we have units which are disconnected for over 2 weeks, we have to address them. There probably might be a major issue, but not simply just the server not receiving data. In order to understand which units we're talking about, I'm moving to below here to the table, and we can see actually the information about the units. So we have 4 units. These units, it states the fleet in the group, and we have the asset status, which of course is disconnected. But what's more important is, first of all, to understand the asset disconnection time. Okay, it's been disconnected for quite a while. We can view the signal quality to understand if the reason for the disconnection is low signal quality, which means that normally what that means is that the vehicle is simply in a location that doesn't have a very good signal. In these cases, mostly once they move to a place which has a better signal, the data will be saved and then be transmitted to the server. Another reason for disconnection, and this is kind of applicable to these days, is the external voltage, the car battery. So if the battery is very low, this isn't the case here. However, if the battery is very low, then there will be no power to the unit, and then the unit will be disconnected as well. One more thing I want to show you is this 2 graphs here. It says online and it has data. Okay. Basically, what we're doing here is we're trying to make the separation between if the unit is online, which means it's actually functioning, and if data is being passed and sent to the server. Okay. Again, as I mentioned, it's possible that the unit was disconnected and the unit is connected and it's working properly. However, data isn't being passed to the server. And this is exactly what it's reflecting. It's reflecting if there are 68% of the units which are online, okay, they're working, they're functioning. 69.2% of the units are actually passing data to the server. And again, that could give a good indication really of which units are online, they're functioning properly, perhaps they're not receiving a proper signal, and that is the reason why data is not being passed to the server, rather than being concerned that the fact that it may or may not be disconnected. Just like any other graph dashboard I'm going to show you, I can perform any type of filtering within the data itself, including the vehicle. Okay, and if this is of course one by one. If I want to view multiple assets, I simply select them from the select assets. Excuse me. Again, before moving on, happy to answer questions. Okay, the events are refueling and overspeeding. Again, I think I answered this to Diego, but I'll answer it again. What we're seeing here, the events that we saw in the previous dashboard were the top events for these specific vehicles, okay? The reason you did not see overspeeding events in this specific example is because they were triggered. If the overspeeding events are triggered, you'll be able to see them, one. Two, I'm going to show you additional dashboards. That you will be able to see this information. So this isn't something that we forgot. The events dashboard is a very general dashboard intended to show the most common events. The more specific events regarding fuel, regarding speeding, and idling, stuff like that is coming up. And Collins, there's also a dashboard about the battery voltage, and that will come up as well, okay? So if you're concerned about these events, we will get to them. Any questions about this specific dashboard, the solution availability? Okay, then I'm going to move on. Of course, you can type your question here. I'm actually answering. I want to see if I have another question. How are we testing the signal quality? We have a SIM card which sends out the signal to our servers. If we do not receive a signal, then that means that the quality is low. That's a good question. Normally it's 90 days. I will get back to you to check if the event dashboard is 90 days as well. Okay, the fuel dashboard. This is actually a renewal or kind of a recreation of an existing dashboard. Okay, what we did is we try to make it a little bit more simple to read, to view, and to understand. The reasoning behind the fuel dashboard, I believe, is very clear. It's intended to save and to monitor and to save fuel consumption. For those of you who are familiar with the previous fuel dashboard, again, it's very similar. We have the general metrics. Okay, we have the number of vehicles, the distance traveled, and we're referring to fuel. We're always comparing the fuel consumed with the actual distance that was traveled by the vehicle. We have the amount, the overall liters refueled. We have the overall fuel consumption. And we have the fuel expenses and average fuel cost per kilometer. Okay, and the fuel consumption, again, this is average on a 7.9 average kilometer per liter. Now, these metrics are meant to give a very good overview of the current status of the fuel consumption. Okay, you can see the expenses, you can see the overall fuel consumption, and you can get a good idea of the current status. If the feeling is that the fuel consumption is too high, is too low, is the cost too high, and of course, the fuel consumption should always be compared to the distance traveled. To see more specific information, we need to kind of go down and we need to take a look at the graph of the table, which appears at the bottom. So this graph is a little bit similar to the previous graph we had. This graph compares the fuel consumption, the overall fuel consumption, and the distance all the vehicles have traveled. So what do we see here? We see here in the green bars, the normal operational fuel consumption. Okay, in this case, it was 98 liters. At the, sometimes there are certain cases where the green bar turns kind of into an orange section. Okay, why? Because in addition to the normal operational fuel consumption, we're identifying idle consumption, meaning fuel consumption while the vehicle was idling. And in certain cases, we will also identify a red section of the graph. In this case, we're not seeing it, but a red section of the graph, which will identify abnormal fuel consumption, what we used to call or refer to fuel drops. That's either fuel which was consumed if the vehicle was not operational, or if we're seeing a very large decline of fuel in a very short period of time. Obviously, when we're looking at this information, we expect to see the bars like we're seeing it now, mostly green, and we expect to see less of the orange and red sections, because that simply means the fuel was wasted without being consumed properly, especially with the orange sections when we're talking about idling. Oftentimes, it's very abundantly clear that once we minimize the amount of idling, then we could also optimize the fuel consumption, the costs that are related to it. As I mentioned before, I mentioned it several times, we can't really discuss fuel consumption without addressing it together with distance traveled. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to see a correlation between the operational fuel consumed and the distance traveled. The distance traveled is indicated by this black bar. And you can see that there is a correlation here. We see that we have 98 liters consumed and we have 709 kilometers traveled. We have a little bit of a higher number of kilometers in this case, and therefore the fuel consumption went increased. And then we have, this was the weekend, and then we have much less consumption, and we can see that the fuel has decreased as well. So basically the idea here is to, one, identify days where we're seeing abnormal or idling consumption, which are significantly higher than the standard operational consumption. And we're also checking if there's a correlation between the distance traveled and the actual consumption of fuel. Yeah, I see there's several questions. I'm going to finish talking about the dashboard and then I'm going to get to it, don't worry. Okay, and of course, as I mentioned before, every one of these days, I can click and then view the information at the bottom. So what is the bottom information? The bottom information provides for me specific information per vehicle. Okay, so again, we see the distance traveled, we see the overall fuel consumption, we see the fuel consumption rate, and we're color coding it in order to provide a little bit of a level of warning that the fuel consumption may not seem to be correct. We see the number of times that the vehicles were refueled. Okay, so somebody asked me about refueling events, so here we can see the number of refuels, we can see how much liters were refueled overall. And in case of abnormal consumption or idling consumption, again, I'll be able to see this information. Now, if I wanted to perform deeper analysis, I could select a specific day, perhaps a day that seems suspicious to me, that seems that there's a lot of either idling or abnormal fuel consumption. And I could click on it, and then of course I could see the information of each and every vehicle pertaining to that specific day. So, so that's one option. Another option is I could view this information we're seeing here per vehicle. So that's a specific vehicle, and then I could see the daily activity in terms of the consumption and distance on a daily basis. Okay, let's answer your questions. I observed, hold on. I observed towing event in your dashboard. Can we see the event? Why would it have such numbers? Are you referring to the events dashboard? Is there abnormal consumption for fuel drops? Will you see it in gallons in my user? If your user is set to gallons, you will be able to see it in your user. Yes, currently my user is set to liters, but if your user is set to gallons, you'll see all the information here in gallons, and you see your kilometer to miles, you'll be able to see the miles, everything you'll be able to see according to whatever you set. Will the fuel abnormal also show those that come with main battery disconnects on the dashboard? I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm not sure I understand the connection. So if you could perhaps explain what you're referring to. Is fuel dashboard same as the operational summary report? The operational summary report mostly details with the hours that the vehicles were utilized. So it's mostly details, and there's also a dashboard that details that. The distance that the vehicles traveled, how much time during the working day the engine was on, which is how much time it was off, how much time there was idling. So the fuel dashboard is more specific to the fuel consumption. The operational summary report, which we're referring to, is more intended to view really how much time the drivers in the vehicle were actually driving, and how much time they spent idling, how much time they spent not driving, and to give a good sense of the utilization of the vehicle. Yes, everything we have here, all the dashboards can be exported to Excel. I'll show that to you in a minute. I'd like to see a month of your fueling dashboard report. Okay. Let's give it a minute. It's going to take a minute to run. Okay, so now we're seeing a month. Of course, if you're looking at a month, you could see additional patterns and more information than simply looking at 8 days. Here we see, for instance, there are several days that we're seeing abnormal consumption. And I'm sure if we take a deeper look, we could also identify certain days that that there's less correlation between the distance and the fuel which was consumed. And of course, if I, for instance, want to take a look at this dashboard here, just to understand where this came from. So we see that we have 27 liters, which were consumed by vehicle 8, and this was abnormal consumption. Okay. I'm not sure if this answers your question. However, this is a month of information. I also requested export. So I could do two things. One, I could export each one of the graphs to Excel. Okay, so I simply click on this icon here to export to Excel, and I can do this for each and every one of the graphs we're taking a look at. Or I can also right-click, export to Excel, and this will be export the entire dashboard to an Excel. That's a good question. Currently, there is, just to explain what Iken is referring to. If I go into a specific unit, let's do it right now. If I go into a specific unit, I go to the Preferences tab. There's two sets here. It says liter per hour and liter per 100 kilometers. I can set this. However, this doesn't do anything in terms of the system, which means I can set this, and then I could go to the fuel dashboard and check that the liter per hour corresponds to the consumption preset. However, at the moment at least, there's no functionality within the system that will provide this type of comparison. So for now, it's for knowledge, general knowledge only, and not something which can be operational within the dashboards. Okay, I'm going to move on. I do apologize, but we do have a lot of dashboards to go over, so I will see your questions and I'll be happy to answer them. But I still want to move on. So the next dashboard we have is the maintenance dashboard. And actually, let me once again go into a vehicle. Okay, and I'm going to go into maintenance tab. And I don't know how many are familiar with this, so I want to show this. Basically, the maintenance tab is meant to indicate dates of maintenance. When is my next maintenance, either per date or per distance or per engine hours? When is my next licensing due? When is my next warranty expiration due? When is my next checkup? So I can indicate, utilizing this mechanism, I can indicate when when I'm expecting another maintenance. That's very simple for me to be able to identify them once the maintenance date is due. And it could be, again, either via date or via kilometers, or really any preference I have in terms of reminding myself. Now, why would I do this? So I have this information. Once I have it keyed in, I could go into events, and I could actually set up events which will notify me once the maintenance occurs. So if I have a maintenance date, due date, and I'm going to click on advisory, for instance, probably send me an email. I don't think it needs to send me an SMS. I want to know 30 days before the maintenance due date, which I set up before, which I showed you. 30 days before the maintenance due date, I want to receive a notification. I want to receive an alert reminding me of the event. Okay? And then I can set up, of course, I can set up this by due date, I can set this up by distance, by working hours, set up for licensing, warranty, checkup, etc. Why did I show all this to you? I show this to you because this dashboard is a reminder dashboard for me. What it tells me, sorry, I want to do this for all the vehicles. What it tells me, or it indicates for me, what are the maintenance due dates or distance or engine hours which I missed, which are overdue. So if we look here at vehicle 6, I see that I set up an overdue maintenance distance and I missed it. It's past the distance. And I set up an overdue engine hour maintenance, also past the engine hours. And if I take a look at vehicle 7, I also see that it passed the warranty. If I take a look at vehicle 8, I see that it passed all 4. Okay, so this is an indicator. This is a reminder for me that I need to address my vehicles. Now, if I were to select, for instance, vehicle 7, and I take a look at the bottom here, I can see that currently my engine hours is 1,900. My next maintenance engine hours is 20,000, and I'm okay. I'm good. I don't have a problem. Okay. However, I see that my next maintenance date was on October 16, 2019. We're now in May 14, 2020, which means that a full year, almost a year has passed, and did not indicate that my maintenance is passed. And therefore, I see an X here, which indicates for me that I still have maintenance overdue, and I should probably take my vehicle to maintenance. Now, if you are managing this properly, which means if you're constantly indicating the maintenance date and the distance, and you have alerts sent to you, this could be a very effective tool for you to be able to receive reminder of maintenance for all the vehicles that are under your supervision. Okay, moving on. Okay, mileage. Okay. First of all, there is a bug in this section. As I mentioned, this will be released on Sunday, so they're still taking care of some issues. It says here mileage should actually say kilometer. Of course, somebody asked me this earlier, I'm mentioning it again. Of course, if you have different settings within your user, you'll be able to see it in miles and not kilometers. It's all dependent on whatever settings you have set in the system. The mileage dashboard is all about distance. Okay, this is all about the distance which were covered by your vehicles. In order for you to be able to understand the efficiency of your drivers and the efficiency of your vehicles, if your vehicles are being efficient, if they're being productive, if it is a requirement for the fleet to be driving because they're courier or truck drivers, etc. This gives an indication of how productive your vehicles are in terms of distance. So we see the overall distance, and we see the daily distance, and we also see information about the trips. And we can view this information on a daily basis. Okay, so we see on a daily basis exactly what distance, what kilometers were covered by all the vehicles. Okay, so for instance, on May 6th, we see that vehicle 12, which is signified in purple, did 363 kilometers versus vehicle 13, which is the dark green, which did only 111. We can see this information on a daily basis. You can see right away this was during the weekend, so there was less traveling, and we have days that there were more traveling. So you have actually two pieces of information here. You can see the overall distance traveled by covered by all the vehicles. Okay, you could also view this information on a vehicle-by-vehicle basis. Of course, you also have this information on the table below. Okay, so you can see for each vehicle how much distance was traveled and how many trips were done and what was done with turn reading. One thing we've added here is distance per working hours in average. Okay, so what we did is we took the entirety of the working hours. Let's say they were 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. And we calculated on average what was the distance they covered per working hour. So actually, in this case, you can really understand for each vehicle how much kilometers they covered per hour. Okay, and of course, this again refers to the productivity and the efficiency of the drivers and the vehicles and the work day. Of course, like anything, I could always see this information by filtering. Then I have the distance traveled, for instance, for vehicle 12 on a daily basis. This pie chart here gives me, it's a little bit similar to what we saw before. This is the percentage of distance traveled by each and every one of the vehicles. Okay, so we have vehicle 10, he passed 20% of the distance. Sorry, let me explain this a little bit better. If I take the entire distance covered as 100%, this is the contribution of each vehicle to that 100%. Okay, so if the 100% was 7,932 kilometers, then vehicle 12 traveled 23% of that, vehicle 10, 20.44% of that, etc., etc. So again, this could give a good indication of which vehicles are traveling more than others in terms of their productivity. I'm going to stop with more for questions. If you have a question about this dashboard or the ones I already showed you, I'll be happy to answer. I'll give a minute because we still have several more dashboards to go. Okay, moving on. Of course, if you still have questions, I'll be happy to answer them after the next one. The next one is safety. So this is actually two dashboards dealing with this topic. This is the first one. So the safety dashboard is a very general dashboard which gives a good indication of how safe the vehicles are in terms of their driving. Okay, we have the vehicle's driving score. One second. Let me run this again real quick because it seems like the score is off. Yeah, it seemed to be something weird there. So we're looking at the vehicle's driving score, and this score is specifically for safety events. Okay, when I'm referring to safety events, I'm referring to, of course, overspeeding. I'm referring to any events which are registered by the accelerometer, harsh acceleration, harsh brake, harsh turn, and accidents. And in case you have any type of mobile or move-on connected, then any type of proximity alerts or speeding will be considered as well. So basically what we're trying to do here is indicate the current safety level of your fleet. Okay? And we see here that this is the average score. We have 0.4 accelerometry events per kilometer, 0.4 ADAS events per kilometer. We saw this before. Specifically, this speed does not have any type of overspeeding events. However, if there were, we would be able to see the percentage of overspeeding of distance. This is very important because here you can really understand how much of the entire trip, how much of the entire kilometer which these vehicles have accumulated were spent overspeeding. And obviously, if this number is very high, then you have a major issue on your hand, because that means that most of the trip, your vehicles are spent overspeeding in very large percentages. We can see the scores on a daily basis, and this is good for reviewing trends, but I think the more important thing is really to see the safety metrics per vehicle. So we see the score, we see the speeding events, again, the overspeeding percentage, which I mentioned before, and we have the accelerometry events per kilometer and the ADAS events per kilometer. I'm not going to answer questions because I want to show you the next dashboard, which hopefully will answer some of your questions, because basically this dashboard gives an overview. The next dashboard is going to be much more specific. And I'm referring to the speed and accelerometer events dashboard, okay? So as I mentioned before, what we saw before was kind of an overview. This is your current situation. Now, this dashboard actually places the events in front of you and says, this is what's happening right now with your vehicles. And you can see right away that in opposite a little bit to what we normally do, the dashboard begins with a table. And this table gives specific events per vehicle, okay? So we can see the distance, and again, just like with fuel, distance is a factor as well, because a lot of events per distance, if vehicle travel a very long distance, then maybe it makes sense to see a lot of events, versus a vehicle who travels lower distance, and if they have high events, that kind of means again that there's probably some kind of issue. So we have the distance traveled. We have the total speed and accelerometer events. We can see that some of these are done quite a lot. Okay, these are 8 days. If there were speeding events, we would be able to see all of them. Okay, so there's actually only one right now. And they're set up according to severity. That depends on the severity you set up in the events. The overspeeding distance, this is kind of going back to what I showed you before, how much of this distance, how much of this 1,621 kilometers was spent overspeeding. We have the maximum speed covered. Okay, so we could actually see what was the maximum speed. Now we can see the speed of the average trip. Okay, again, these aren't really vehicles with sped, which have a lot of speeding. But again, I think, especially with regard to speeding, given the overspeeding distance and the maximum speed and the average trip speed, you can have a very good indication of what really was the behavior of the driver in terms of their speeding. In order to kind of normalize the information and try to take away the distance, the rest is per 100 kilometers. So again, we're seeing quite a lot of accelerometer events occurring over 100 kilometers. We're seeing a lot of acceleration events and brake events in truck, in vehicle 6, and additional information. So all of these are really intended to give you a very good breakthrough and a very good idea of what your vehicles are doing. We're actually showing the same information compared to the distance traveled, okay? Basically, these are the accelerometer events on a daily basis. The gray part shows the distance traveled, and the bar here shows the actual events, okay? So again, we're trying to identify a correlation between the distance traveled and the events which occurred. And obviously, if we're seeing a very, very high amount of events versus a very low amount of distance traveled, that's a very large red flag for us. We need to come and say something is not right here. The behavior and the patterns of the driver of these vehicles are basically a safety risk. And we have the exact same information available to us within the speeding events, okay? Now we only have one. If we had several, and again, we'll be able to see a correlation between the distance traveled and the speeding events and act accordingly. Uh, 12 months, I would probably prefer a report for the 12 months. I'm not sure what type of information you would see for 12 months. So I could check and get back to you, but I'm not entirely sure that's possible. The data exists, but in terms of having a dashboard for it, it's tricky. Where do you see the parameter events and how they are weighted? I'm not sure what you mean by weighted. The parameters of the events are all set within. Okay, so if you need more information on how to set up the event session, that's kind of in a different session. You could talk to me directly. In the speed accelerometer, one now version presents the same data in multiple axes configured to a single vehicle. That is multiple drive axes in one vehicle. Again, that depends if that very much depends if you have driver identification. If you have driver identification, we'll be able to see the information on the driver now in the vehicle. What's the safety dashboard, events dashboard? Events dashboard is the general dashboard. It presents all the events, every single one of them. The safety dashboard and the speed and accelerometer events are specific, drill down towards these type of events. Probably about only speeding events. I'm not entirely sure I understand. The dashboard has a very specific evaluation and analysis of speeding events, so I'm not sure I understand the question. Of course, if you don't set up the accelerometer events, you will still be able to see the speeding events. Of course, they're still here. This will be 0. But I'm not sure that's something I would recommend, because accelerometer events and speeding events are still a very, very important impact and factor of the driving safety. Yeah, you can see, but not using this. May I see where the vehicle maximum acceleration? You can, but actually that would probably not be through a dashboard. You would need to go and see this. I'd say in my alerts and my tracks within the web zone. Again, this is not the topic of this specific session, so you can contact me directly, and I can show you where you can see this. My suggestion, can we have a view of a monthly analysis? My suggestion is just because we don't have a lot of time and there's still some more dashboards to cover. Once the dashboards will be added Sunday, you're more than welcome to go into the dashboard and see it in different months and see the impact of it. Okay, I do apologize, but we really need to move forward since we have additional dashboards to view. Okay, utilization and discipline. Utilization. I think there was, hold on a second. Okay, so utilization and discipline is a little bit similar to the dashboard we saw before. The idea behind this dashboard is not to focus on speeding or driving events, but to refer to the utilization of the vehicle and to the idling hours. Okay, and that's exactly what it shows. So we have 2 scores here. We have a utilization score, which is based on the actual utilization of the vehicle. What does that mean? It means the percentage of engine hours out of working hours, out of the entirety of the working hours, how much time the engine was actually spent running. Okay, basically we check every time the engine is on, the vehicle is on, we begin counting those hours, and once the day ends, we can go in and say, okay, the vehicle was utilized for 40%, 50%, 60%. Obviously, in cases of fleets, which there's a correlation between the productivity and the amount of hours that the vehicle was being utilized, this is a major factor. The discipline is much more simple. It's simply based on idling hours. How many hours the vehicle was spent idling, which means it was running, the engine was running, but nobody was actually driving. The vehicle wasn't moving. So here we have the average scores. you can see the total engine hours. This is the actual utilization. Okay, so if I'm the fleet manager for this fleet, I can see that I spent 55% engine hours out of the working hours. Of course, this is up to the fleet manager to determine if this number is acceptable or too high or too low. And then we have 30 idling hours, and that's 12% of the engine hours was spent idling. In this case, this is actually much more objective, 30 hours. I'd say any idling hours is too long. Okay, 30 hours is quite a lot. Now it's up to us to try to analyze and understand where this comes from. So we have, as always, as you can see, there's pretty much a pattern throughout all the dashboards. We have the score for both discipline and utilization. So the black is utilization, the discipline is gray. So we can see on a daily basis the score for each day and understand if there's any type of trends. I see that, for instance, on May 9th, there was the discipline score was very high. At the same time, May 9th was a weekend, so that may be the reason. And of course, we want to be able to see this information per vehicle. Okay? So we have all the scores. So we see, for instance, that a vehicle 11, they did have a perfect score of utilizing. However, the discipline score is very low, except that in this case, they had 1 working hour, so it's not a very good indication. So it's always need to take into consideration when we're viewing this information, the distance traveled and the working hours, because only if we're having very good data, which we have good working hours, good amount of distance traveling, we have a good basis for analysis. And for instance, we see here, just by looking at this graph very quickly, we see here that vehicle 9, while they supposedly spent 72% of the time with their engine running, 19%, almost 20% of that time was spent idling. So it seems like his utilization is very high. However, if you look at the discipline, we notice that a lot of time was spent during this engine hours. A lot of time was spent actually with no movement. So there was no productivity involved, and quite the opposite. There was a lot of fuel which was consumed. And we can review this information. Of course, as I always mention this, we can of course highlight a vehicle in order to see all the data dashboards presented. So I can see, for instance, for vehicle 6, their daily routine. Okay, so I can see what they do on a daily basis, and of course, I can move between vehicles. I'm going to move on to the next dashboard, and then that's the last one. This is the last dashboard, but I actually think this is probably the most interesting one, and probably one of the more relevant dashboards, because it's specifically for battery health, vehicle battery health. I actually had a webinar last week specifically on this topic, and just in time, we have a new dashboard to also reflect the data that's relevant to this. What we're looking at, we're looking at understanding the current voltage state of the battery. Okay, we are in times that the vehicles are not being moved. A lot of vehicles are static. They're not in movement. And once they're static and not in movement, we right away we need to be much more cautious and much more wary about the state of the battery. Now, in general, batteries above 12 volts are considered ideal voltage. Okay, they're healthy batteries. There's no problem with them, and we do not need to be concerned about them. Batteries between 11.5 volts and 12 volts, again, it's not a cause for concern. However, we do see that the voltage is a little bit lower than expected, and we need to be careful, and we need to monitor those batteries so they don't go lower. If they go lower, they go from 11.5 volts to 10.5 volts. Again, we need to be very, very careful. Why? Because once a battery reaches 10.5 volts, the battery begins deteriorating and there's no way back. Okay? So if it goes below 10, I'm being very general, of course, it depends on a lot of other factors, such as the type of the battery and the age of the battery. But in general, a battery that goes below 10.5 volts begins deteriorating, and there's no way back. The health of the battery will not be the same as when it was new. So our objective is not to let the battery go lower, than 10.5 volts. So once we see that it crosses the 11.5 volt mark, goes down to 11, or gets close to that, that's the point where we should take a driver, send them over to the vehicle, have them turn on the vehicle, have the vehicle running for about 15 minutes, if possible a little bit more, to get the voltage back up. If it goes below 10.5 volts, it gets to around 9 volts, etc., then there's already a risk that the battery will not have enough power to actually turn on the vehicle. In this case, it's preferable to have some kind of jumper cables or some kind of some way to ignite the vehicle and then send it to be repaired. So basically, this graph, which is a real-time graph, shows the current state of the battery. So here we're pretty much okay. Again, we should monitor these two vehicles, but in general, we're okay with in terms of the battery. We could also see this information. Sorry, I want to mention another thing. In this case, we also have the ability to select a status. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show, right now the most relevant thing would be off and disconnected, okay? And so basically what I did here is I'm seeing this information only for vehicles which are currently off or disconnected. And then I have information, actually let's do this, let's do it only on off, let's make it easier. And then we have actually information about vehicles, the time and status of the vehicles. So I have two vehicles which have been off for one day, which is pretty much okay. But we have one vehicle which has been off for 7 days. And that's already a red flag for us, okay? That's already a period of time that the battery could be going too low, and we need to make sure that the battery isn't lower than expected. And now, if I go down here to the bottom, I can actually see these vehicles. So we have one vehicle which is off, the battery is at 12.4, we're okay. Another vehicle, the battery is 11.8, we're still okay. And another vehicle where the battery is at 11.7, and this has been down for 7 days. Again, 11.7 is a cause for concern, but probably after 7 days, it's still best to head over to the bus. This is a bus, at least that's what it says. Head over to the bus, turn it on, and let it to drive around for at least 15 minutes to get the battery up and running. Okay, that's it in terms of the dashboards. And let's see, what other questions do we have? Will the suit always work in all vehicles? Yes, it should. Of course, if you see that you have issues, then by all means let us know. We're open to ticket for support, and we will check, but they're supposed to work with all the vehicles, yes. Can you see the location disconnected battery on the map from the dashboard? No, we do not have a connection between the map and the dashboard and the map. You can head over to a report, and you can set up a detailed report with voltage, and there you can see a map location with the disconnection. Another option is to have an event set up, that the power disconnected. It's a very straightforward event, which you can see. Okay, and every time you have, so if I go to power control, I can set up power disconnected, okay, and that means that every time there's a disconnection of the power, you can right away see where the vehicle is located. Right? So those are the two options we have. There's no actual connection between the dashboard and the map, but that's probably something we can consider for future versions. Any other questions? Okay. Once again, I apologize if I did not answer your question or you felt that the answer is not sufficient. you're more than welcome to contact me or contact our support team, and we will be happy to assist. As you can see, there were a lot of dashboards to go over. My suggestion for everyone is wait till next week. Okay, we're on Thursday, the dashboards will be released on Sunday. Take some time to get to know these dashboards, get acquainted with them. And once you get acquainted with them and understand them, then of course, if you have additional questions or additional concerns or even additional suggestions, by all means, you're more than welcome to send a ticket to our support team, and we'll be happy to address them. I think I have another question here. Yes, of course. I will upload the training to our knowledge base, and you'll be able to view the training from there. Thank you for reminding me to mention that. I'll upload it. I will send an email to everyone with the video for the train for this webinar, and you'll be able to view it. Perfect. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it very much. I hope this was useful and beneficial. And as I mentioned, Sunday, this is going live. And then on Monday, you can already, Sunday, once it goes live, you will be able to experience the dashboards for yourself. And again, I hope you find them useful. Question out of topic. If possible, then let's, I'd like to free everybody to go continue their workday. So if you'd like to ask me a question, I'm going to type in my email. Okay, so if you have a question out of topic or something else, then simply you can send me an email. Sorry, I did this privately. Okay. And you can send me an email, and I'll be happy to answer. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.